It's Steve from Black Octopus Sound here, and today we're going to be talking about how to get our bass fat and full of presence with Devious Machine's Bass Focus VST. Bass Focus enriches your sound by adding harmonics that enhance the fundamental frequency of your bass. These harmonics blend seamlessly with the original sound. One of the challenges in modern music production is that most of our listeners are listening on smaller speakers like their iPhones, laptops, or AirPods. Many of these playback systems struggle with that deep, full bass. Adding these new harmonics creates the illusion of more bass presence, particularly on speakers that struggle with it. The drive knob does exactly what you think it will. It amplifies the intensity of the effect of the plugin. I really like to play around with this tone knob here, which sets the balance between odd and even harmonics generated by the plugin. If we are all the way to the left at odd, it will only introduce odd harmonics. If we're all the way to the right, it'll introduce only even harmonics. And if it's anywhere in the middle, it will introduce a balance of both. The easiest example to talk about is how it changes the tone of a sub bass. If we have it set to odd, we get a more square wave style tone. And if we have it all the way set to even, we get a more warm and round style tone. Here's a simple sub bass that I've made with Serum to demonstrate. Let's introduce the Bass Focus plugin. Right away, we're already getting a little bit of extra grit and fullness to the mid-range of the sound. So this is with the drive at about 50%. So let's turn it off and introduce more of the signal. Like all plugins, there's a sweet spot. That sweet spot is usually not fully cranked. So listen to the tone as I changed it over to odd harmonics exclusively. See, it turns into almost a square wave style tone, where when I turn it to even, it gets thick, warm, and rounder sounding. The sustain knob indicates the sustain behavior of these additional harmonics that we introduce. At the natural position, the sustain will mimic the nature of the input signal. So if it's a kick drum, you'll get about as much sustain as the kick drum itself has. However, if we crank it all the way to max, we start to create distance between the original signal sustain and the sustain of the additional harmonics. Moving through the rest of the parameters of the plugin, the dry signal and wet signal faders do exactly what you think they do. They are volume faders for both the dry and the wet signal that come with mute and solo buttons. The split frequency line here helps us inform the plugin where we want to start having harmonics introduced. Any frequencies below the split frequency line will have harmonics introduced. From here, we can go to the top fader and use it as a mixing tool so that we can further dial in the mid-range and high-end that we're looking for. So if we crank it, we get a bit more sizzle from those upper harmonics. To further showcase the plugin, we're going to check out this 808 sample from a Black Octopus sample pack. It already sounds pretty good, and we're going to fatten it up and fill it out just a bit more with Bass Focus. I love how this Bass Focus plugin adds just the perfect amount of extra weight and fullness to the low end. An interesting use case for Bass Focus is on snare drums to bring out more of the depth, layer, and character that it has. Here's a snare sample from the Leviathan 4 sample pack on Black Octopus Sound. I selected this sample because it has interesting metallic depth to its sustain character. Let's see what Bass Focus does to the snare. It increasingly adds weight and sizzle to the mid-range of the snare, which I find super interesting. If I want to really elevate the sizzle that Bass Focus adds to the snare, I'm going to go to the top fader here and give it a little bit of a lift. It adds just a little bit of extra weight, fullness, depth, sizzle, and character to the snare drum. The last use case that we have for Bass Focus is actually in mastering a full track. To showcase how Bass Focus can really add punch and weight to the low end of a full track, I've got a track that I'm working on here called Redemption queued up. We're going to look at two areas in particular, the orchestral section in the breakdown, as well as the big bass heavy drop. So it has the vocals, the string bass, as well as the cello. Listen to how Bass Focus fills up the low end of the orchestral section. Oh yeah. It really adds so much life and fullness to that low end of the mix of this track. Bass focus was the solution that I was looking for to really get that sense of felt in the body fullness in the bass section. Let's check out what bass focus does to the drop. If you want to do a quick A and B with the plugin, all you need to do is hit the mute button on the wet fader here from within the plugin. All of a sudden, that low end feels so much fuller, fatter. It makes the track feel more emotionally impactful when it hits. You can check out Bass Focus and the rest of the Devious Machines plugin lineup on their website, deviousmachines.com. They have many other cool plugins with a special shout out to their plugin Texture, which adds unique texture to existing sounds that we're using in our music. You can take a hi-hat or drum groove and add interesting and unique textures mixed into the sound. A classic example is adding just a little bit of noise to our hi-hat loops to give it just a bit more texture, or you can even add things like water splashing and other flavors of sound textures to make your sound design sound more complex and ear-catching. Bass Focus is amazing and I highly recommend checking it out. Thanks for watching.